wanted, I brought Bart on. I mean, we just chatted like 2 seconds ago, but like I said to you in the email, you guys hear from me. I mean, you know who I am, my position on, I've lectured you guys before this became the topic of interest. And so I wanted you to hear from just another voice. I mean, Bartley does work in my office. He's a public defender. But, I want you to just hear from another person. He's also significantly more eloquent than I am, which may be better since you're doing things in writing.
Okay.
So do you want to just tell them, kind of give your spiel about what you guys are working on, what your goals are, where you're trying to get?
Yeah, for sure. So right now I'm part of an organization called Justice in the Classroom. And basically it's a student-led initiative that's trying to bring more diverse perspectives into the classroom, because a lot of the curriculum that students learn is pretty Eurocentric and doesn't take into account different ethnicities and different cultures. And also, given the current racial tensions in our country, I think it's very necessary that we do that. And so we have a series on social media called History Outside the Classroom, where we basically talk about issues that typically aren't covered in schools. And so next year we're planning on doing a post about the prison system. And so I thought it would be a good idea to chat with you both a little bit about the different disparities, or, kind of the inequalities you see within the prison system, if you've seen any. Okay, so I'll just...
How long you got, buddy? I'm gonna let Bart take the lead on this, honestly, because I just think it's, like I said, I want you to get a different person than me constantly lecturing you about this crap.
Okay. So my spiel, what I think that is my anecdotal experience of being in the criminal justice system for a decade here, and then for about 3 years in San Francisco before I came down here, I think is supported by the statistics. If you look at people who study criminology along the way and the outcomes that our criminal justice system produces, what I think is undeniable to anybody except those like on the far right who have a very invested need for it not to be this way, and desire to look at everything from a certain perspective. I think anybody who looks just at the data is going to see the same thing, which is that at every step of the way, when there is discretion to be used, people of color get treated much harsher. I think in my personal experience, and I don't, speak for everyone, I'm sure there are overt racists who know that they're racist and go about it, very intentionally. But I think the biggest problem that we have at every step of the way is implicit bias. And what you get at every step is the person who's generally the decision maker, from the police officer to the district attorney to the judge to the probation officer, at every step along the way is generally a white person, is generally a person from a privileged background, and they have a hard time identifying with people who are different looking from them, have different backgrounds from them, who have names that don't sound like their names, things that they aren't familiar with. And I don't know that I would say I've encountered many people who I would say are just openly racist, but what we get is that district attorney who is first looking at a case is exercising his or her discretion in a way when they sympathize with this little white kid that they know and they can understand, they get treated with the baby gloves. And the person that has the different name, that has the different color, that has the different background, they don't get those baby gloves. They get the system, and I think that then it's compounded, because what you end up getting is people, well, even if you start with the officers, I think if the officers are out and they see kids doing something bad, they're more likely, if it's a white kid, to just call their parents or take them home or do some informal outcome. People of color are likely to just end up in the system arrested to begin with. And then the district attorney is more likely to not cut them a break and not treat them with those kids' gloves because they can't sympathize with it. They have a harder time You know, I don't think that they're sitting down saying like, this is a person of color and I want to fuck them over, but I think their implicit bias they don't even get to the point of looking at, am I treating these two people who have done the same thing the same way? And then when you get to court, I think it's compounded again by a judge who is sitting there from a white privileged position and giving harder sentences and giving fewer chances and having their implicit bias about what families of color are like, whether or not they have the same kind of support. They just discount those things that they don't see. They can't identify with it. They don't empathize with it as much. So I think they're far less likely to take that chance and to give lighter sentences and to give more chances and to give more programs. It's like they're already ingrained, like this person's not going to succeed. There's nothing I can do for them. Just move them along. Whereas I think when you have that like white person with a relatively privileged background, or even just a normal background, they're like, they can see themselves in that situation and they can just, you know, take that chance and go lighter and be easier than they do. I had a judge once, and this is in adult court, so it's a little different, but I had a judge once who was just absolutely horrified that my client, who was a Latina woman, who was charged with a residential burglary from the woman that she worked for. She was charged with taking items out of the house as she cleaned the house. Mm-hmm. And this judge just acted like it was the absolute, you know, like worst thing that could ever happen. And in talking with her, it became clear, it's like, she's just seeing herself as, this could be me, right? I could be that victim. Like I have someone who's of color who comes into my house and who cleans my house and is with my nice stuff. And it just was so emotional. And I had such a hard time getting her to get to a sentence that I thought was more fair, because she was just so hung up on like, well, this is terrible. This is the worst thing that could happen. You bring this person into your house. And I'm like, we see child molestation every day. We see murder. We see like all of this. This is like a minor property crime that you are all up in arms about, because it's very easy for you to sympathize with that victim, as opposed to like sympathize with my client, who was a woman of color who didn't speak English, who had a name that was very different from the judge's name. And she was just, you know, ready to lash out and do much worse. So I think that's really, for me, when I look at like the biggest problem that we have in our system, it's implicit bias. It is all the decision makers have very similar backgrounds. So people with those same backgrounds get treated very differently from people that they can't sympathize with, people that they see as the other. And it just gets compounded at every single step until you get, you know, these kids, African-American kids, Latino kids, who it's just the school to prison pipeline, because they're not given the same chances. And when you sit down and just statistically look at the outcomes that they get worse outcomes at every single stage for the same behavior. And then we know that once someone hits the system, that is just, it fucks them up every which way but loose. You know, we don't have a system that is designed to really rehabilitate people. It's just about punishment. And so, I mean, Ayala can tell you also, the number one question that we get asked as public defenders, you go into a conference to try to settle a case or to try to talk about a case or a client, and the first question you get is, what's the record? You know, and so it's, once you're in there and they've got you and they got something on you, it's always going to get worse from there. And if you look at situations where, like, you know, the poor brown kid gets picked up and the police the first time decide to take him in instead of just calling the parents. And then the district attorney decides to file that case instead of just letting it go or letting it go to diversion. And then the judge doesn't take a chance on them or takes fewer chances on them than they do with someone who looks like them. And it's just this constant compounding of worse outcome leads to worse outcome leads to worse outcome. And that's your first case. Once you have a couple of those cases or a couple of those situations, you're just fucked. Like, the judge is like, they look at it like, this person's got 3 cases already. I'm done, whatever, just give them jail, just move on. And it's so hard for us to bring them off that way of thinking I think the biggest benefit that we have right now is that I think as a society, we're finally starting to wake up to how much the criminal justice system costs. So we have all of these, things that are sort of like ratcheting back punishments and trying to do more programs, not because I think, we've all of a sudden decided like prison's no good, it doesn't help anybody, but it's really fucking expensive, right? I mean, it's so much cheaper to give these other programs than it is to, just throw somebody in forever. And we were doing that forever. We were just throwing people in jail and leaving them for such long periods of time. And we were bankrupt in California doing it. And it made absolutely no sense when you look at the statistics that it didn't help recidivism. People came out of these justice outcomes that were very harsh, more likely to commit another crime than if they had just walked away from it to begin with. So that, I would say, is my spiel about the biggest problem that I see with justice in our system is just the decision makers are all from one background, and they act like I would say most of them, they are offended at the idea of implicit bias. You try to tell them, I think you're looking at this the wrong way because this is a brown person, and I'm not racist. Oh, no, like I have a black friend and I do this and I do that, it's their like failure to be introspective and to look but if you just pull the numbers and look at the outcomes, you see the same thing over and over and over again. And it's that our criminal justice system is incredibly racist. People of color get a worse outcome at every single stage. And if, I don't know if you followed that case of that, the kid in Texas who was the drunk driver who they coined the term the Affluenza Defense off him.
That was a while ago.
It was a while ago, yeah. But so this kid, like this white kid, super rich, gets real drunk with some friends and kills a couple people while he's drunk driving. Ends up getting like, I think it was like a 6-month suspended sentence, like basically nothing compared to what someone else would get for that kind of crime. And his attorneys had argued, that he had affluenza because he was always so rich and privileged that he didn't end up, he couldn't appreciate the consequences of his actions and all of that because he'd always just had this like pampered lifestyle. And what I found like so ironic about it was even while his attorneys are making that argument and saying like, haha, look, this is what it is. He's just too pampered. The judges bought it. They were like, that could have been my kid. My kid had a really good life. My kid could make this mistake. So I'm going to take a chance on him, and I'm going to let him, and if you follow that particular story, he ends up running away to Mexico because he can't go to jail and all kinds of other nonsense. But it's the idea of affluenza is real. And it's not even just on, the defendant's side, it's the judge's side, it's everybody's side saying, when I can identify with a person in this, that's where my sympathies are going to lie. That's the person that's going to get the benefit. And we have, especially here in Ventura County, a bench that is really white and privileged and rich. And it is, it's kind of our demographics, just to begin with, that it's a little more our demographics, but it's also, it's a problem. And I think that until the decision makers in the criminal justice system, the cops and the district attorneys and the judges, until they start being a little more introspective and really being open to the idea that you may not know you're racist, but what you are doing produces racist outcomes. The choices that you are making are producing racist outcomes. Until they can really conceptualize that and internalize it, I don't think things are going to change very much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's my spiel. That's it. I'm done.
Good spiel. And I think Bart's right. I mean, that really comes down, obviously we do, we consistently go to trainings as public defenders. We have to have our continuing education. But I would say in the last 5 years, I think Bart would probably agree with me that we do a large portion of our training constantly focuses on bringing in implicit bias, making sure that the juries understand. It doesn't mean your heart says, I hate these people, but we all do it because we've all been trained to do it because this is the world we live in. and it becomes a consistent issue. And one of the other things to kind of, again, build on Bartley's commentary is, you know, if we're talking about the kids, right? If we're talking about this 15, 16, 17-year-old dummies, sorry, Manas, that are making dummy ass decisions because you're not, you know, 40 yet. You know, someone like yourself, let's say, you know, you can go, your parents can afford to stand in and say, no, 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 I'm going to get my kid professional drug treatment. I'm going to get my kid these other things. My kid doesn't need a judge involved, and my kid doesn't get involved in the juvenile justice system when he did the same thing that another kid, maybe a person of color, who we know statistically speaking, and we know just systematically speaking, is more likely to be in a more impoverished household. And so the family can't stand up and divert that person to these private practices. And so what's left is juvie. And when your parents don't make it to that court date, they're seen as, because they're working their butts off because they're barely putting food on the table, and you've got 3 siblings, or they're helping your grandparents and whatever else may be going on. The court sees that as they lack a support system from the family. So we should probably keep them in baby jail. And then they're in baby jail. And then they're this kid that probably maybe, I don't know, did a little bit of drugs because he was just being a dummy and probably would have never, you know, or just wanted to have a good time, whatever, you know, that's not what we're selling here. But you know, it's this kid all of a sudden who would otherwise, in a more privileged, more, you know, having more capabilities, having more resources, this more poverty-stricken kid, if you want to say that, is now in custody. And now he's stuck in custody with maybe people that should be there because they truly have done more heinous things. You know, a lot of us public defenders and criminal defense attorneys in general, you know, call juvenile and call prison, this is a training ground. You go to juvie and you learn how to be a real criminal. And because you're there at the time without family support, because your parents are trying to work their tushes off to do the right thing for you, now you're just with a bunch of other people who are being jailed, and you walk out of there with all kinds of new knowledge you should never have.
And trauma. It is
highly traumatizing.
If you study juvenile justice, it is a well-known and accepted tenet that you do more intervention does more harm. For the most part with juvenile justice, if you know, you don't want them to go to juvie because it is traumatic. It is harmful to them. It's not rehabilitative, and they come out more likely to commit a crime or to make a bad decision than when they went in.
Yep. And that's just across the board consistent. And if we're talking about kind of the school to prison pipeline, like Bart was saying earlier, that's where it starts. So this kid went out and did some dummy things. His parents don't have the money to bail him out of there or to otherwise offer other resources, so he stays in. And then when he's an adult, he's at Target and someone says that he stole something, but he already has a record, so he must have stolen something. So it's a felony. And because, you know, and it never stops. It never stops. And that's the issue. Mm-hmm. What's that part?
Oh, I just said, yeah, it just goes on and on and on. And you have one contact, and then and once you get in that system, it is damn near impossible to like claw your way out of it. Like when they get the hooks in, then it's every single thing that you do. Like go to the rap sheet, go to the rap sheet. Don't look at what happened in this particular situation. Like, because even if they think in this situation you didn't do anything that wrong, yeah, he probably did something wrong. Look at his rap sheet, you know? It just becomes this like scarlet A, you know, that you wear around all the time, that if you've been involved in the system, like you're not to be believed and you deserve harsher punishment, even if what you did or didn't do in that particular instance isn't really very bad.
Right. And it never essentially ends in the sense of, you know, you're constantly trying, like Bart said, claw your way out of it. And it becomes this issue. I have a guy right now that was at Victoria Outlet with a bunch of his buddies. his buddy stole stuff. He is on camera, not stealing anything. In fact, when his buddy went and got one of those shopping bags, he looked at him and within 15 seconds on tape, walked the hell out of that store.
Mm-hmm.
But he's being charged with a felony conspiracy to commit a shoplift because when he was 17, he stole something.
Yeah.
And is he black? Yes, he is. Is he from Los Angeles? Yes, he is. And they want to know, why is it? Why did he come to Camarillo to go shopping if he wasn't planning on stealing?
That's a question, especially because we have such a low African-American population in Ventura County relative to Los Angeles County. I find that question so offensive. But we get it from judges all the time. Oh, what were they doing out here? You know, like this is a black guy from, they wouldn't say black guy. They know not to say that. They can't like just put it out there. But like, well, what was your client doing here? And you're like, well, you know, fuck you. What does it matter? Like, they're allowed to, we can all come and go as we want. Like, I don't have to justify the existence of my client.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what they're, you know, and it's true. And especially in Ventura County, because we are a very small county and we are very home-based, right? It's kind of cowboy country. So, well, I don't understand, Ms. Benefraim, what is it that made your clients drive by 16 other malls to come to Camarillo? You know he was coming here to steal. And it's like, no, dude, I don't know that. Well, he is a black kid and he does have a prior and he's only been out of CYA for 3 years. And I just, for this particular client, I just wrote a 17-page letter about everything he's done right since he's been out to try to get them to reduce this to a misdemeanor, not because he actually stole anything, because I know that if I put that kid in front of a white jury, which is what I'm getting in this county, they're going to know about his prior and they're going to look at him and they're going to ask those questions too. What's he doing here? He stole when he was 17. He must have stolen when he was 27. And that's not what you're going to get if someone like Bartley is on the stand or someone like me is on the stand. You know that. And that's what's the ultimate unfairness about it all, is it's just, you can't get out. And we don't have enough, like in a way, I almost want to just say, all right, forget rap sheets, delete, just delete it. Look at what this person did today. Is this a crime today? Is this a big deal now? Do we need to cage this person for this? And, you know, that'll never happen, but I think that would be the only true way to make it fair, in the same way that I oftentimes think that judges shouldn't be able to see our clients when they're making decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it is the idea of the rap sheet being this like be all end all, because say you have like a case where, you know, it's a very minor thing, like maybe shoplifting, which everybody does as a kid. Like, so like rich little white girls, you know, everybody across the board, kids be shoplifting. They do it all the time. It's fun, it's exciting, it's no big deal, whatever. If a cop chooses to arrest that person, like that kid, and then take them in, instead of just taking them home or giving them a citation and telling them to come back to court later, which statistically we know the cop is much more likely to take that person of color into the station and book them and hold them in jail rather than just returning them to their parents. So then Monday rolls around and, you know, the rich white girl who never went to jail, who just stayed home with her parents, and then she gets, you know, her family gets her a lawyer and they're ready to pay it back, and they're, you know, her parents come in with like a plan of she's going to go to like treatment and she's going to see a psychiatrist and she's going to do this and she's going to do that. And then they put her on diversion, you know, and they just end up dismissing her case like 6 months later because she did like 3 sessions with the therapist, and her family created that outcome by throwing a whole lot of resources at it. Whereas a person of color who gets arrested never gets cited out. They go to jail, and then they're given the choice on Monday morning. Do you want to just plead guilty right now, say you did it, and go home? Or do you want to stay in jail and fight your case? So of course, anybody at that point is going to say, well, I'll just plead guilty and I'll get out. And then that guilty conviction right there, that is going to fuck them over every time they're ever even suspected of anything else. And every time, yeah, it's like to say, what's that snowball avalanche thing? You know, where it's just like it just starts and then it just yeah.
Right, and it continues to affect you. And I think, you know, for you guys that are working on this project, Monis, I think that then perhaps you guys might consider looking into bail, because bail is probably the, other than implicit bias, for me, that's what I hold up and say, this is wrong. This is so unfair. This creates a system of essentially what Bartley just described to you is an extortion plea. I know that you're not guilty, but like whatever, you want to get out, right? So to get out, you sign this form and then you'll be out. Magic. And it sounds really good at the moment, except for when you're walking down the street and you're a person of color and they're like, oh, you signed that form, you're on probation. And you are riding on the sidewalk, and I'm not making this shit up. This is real reports we get. You're riding on the sidewalk, which is against city code when you're bicycle. You can go ahead and go on in on a violation of probation.
It is, yeah, it's terrible. So do you have anything like that you're thinking about? Any questions that you want to ask or any like perspective? You know your project much better than we do. So
no, this is really good information. But maybe talk a little bit, I want to ask a little bit more about jury selection and your kind of experience with that. And maybe if there's like a lack of diversity you've seen, whether it be in Ventura or San Francisco, Bart, I don't know if you've seen a lack of diversity there also.
I would say that jury selection is incredibly difficult to get diverse people on it. Again, I think implicit bias in terms of the prosecution will exercise their challenges a lot of time against people of color. And it'll be, you know, again, I don't know that they're explicitly being racist about it, but things bother them about a person of color that don't bother them about like a white juror. Like you'll have a person of color say something like, yeah, my brother caught a case and he, you know, ended up in jail and he did this time. And then they'll seize on that. Whereas like you'll have, you know, they'll seize on that and then they'll dismiss that person and that in their excuse for why they're doing it, they'll say things like, well, that person has family members with, you know, a negative criminal justice experience. And then in the same jury pool, there will be like, you know, white people who say things like, you know, oh yeah, my cousin that I was really close to had this experience, and they spend more time with them. And they'll like work it out and ask like, sort of rehabilitate that juror and ask them questions about it, bring it out, and then get, and leave them on. You know, I think it is, they're so quick to like, to be looking for that reason to get rid of that person of color juror because they think they're just going to cut my, you know, they're just going to vote not guilty no matter what. They're just going to do whatever. They're not going to follow the rules. And they're looking for reasons that are acceptable to get rid of them. And I think also what we have is, in terms of socioeconomics, jury service is super expensive. You have to be pretty privileged. You either, you know, if you're going to give up 3 to 5 days of work, you either need to be retired, which is a ton of people in our jurors. You know, our jurors end up being like this huge retirement population because of the people that can afford to do it. Or they have jobs that are very white collar where they're paid to be on jury service. You know, like if Ayala and if either one of us got on jury service, we'd be like, I can serve 4 months. I don't know, my job will pay me forever, you know. But if you're not in that kind of job, if you're working part-time or you're working a job that doesn't pay for it, then you just can't do it. You know, you're not going to choose to be on this jury and not be able to pay rent, you know. So, and we don't pay our jurors. So there's not we get this huge, it's a very big socioeconomic split. And then I think once you get that, we're back at implicit bias where, you know, it is hard for people, like more affluent people sometimes, to sympathize with our clients and with people of color. I think it's damn near impossible to get a fair jury of your peers anywhere. Mm-hmm. You know, you're just not going to do it, especially.
Well, they don't prosecute the people who are the peers jurors we get.
Yeah, for sure. And it is really, you know, I think here especially, we end up with jurors who are mostly retired and, or have jobs at like Amgen, where Amgen's one of the companies that will pay, you know, so, you know, but if you're working at Amgen, you're probably pretty well off anyway, you know. So it's difficult. I think if we paid our jurors, then we would get a lot more of them to be able to serve across all socioeconomic backgrounds. But the way that our system is set up, it's just like rich people get to make those decisions because they're the ones who can afford to take time off work and time out of their lives to do it.
Well, and I think a lot of times, in addition to the socioeconomic issue, which is, I think, the central issue, and Bart's right, we'll never get the government to pay people to come here. And it's too hard to determine, you know, this guy makes 300 a day and this guy makes 50 a day. So how do we do that if they're both coming to jury duty? I think there has been discussion, and I don't know what'll happen, you know, by the time that you're our age. There may very well be legislation that's in that says any company, you must pay this person the exact same wage for coming to jury duty, period, for 2 weeks or period for 4 weeks. There's got to be something like that to kind of even out the game. In addition to that, when you're talking about, let's say we've got these folks that are coming in from, you know, people that are people of color that are coming in and they're expressing their true opinions about, let's say, for example, law enforcement. And so law enforcement, you know, if you come in and you go, hey, this is in my neighborhood, law enforcement I have seen do a lot of negative things. My real, you know, true feelings about this is that I'm not going to trust a cop just because he's a cop. I'll give him a shot, but I have had some negative experiences with police officers. I've had some negative experiences or beliefs about the criminal justice system. And so these folks are just dismissed. And now we're dealing...
As soon as they say anything, whereas, you know, if a white person says that, the district attorney will work with them a little more and try to, like, you know, can you be fair? Like, you know, what was that experience? Were you close with that person? But, you know, I think both the judges and the DAs are quick, you know, because they, you know, this is a person that looks different from them, as a person that has a different name. And so they're just quick to just like get them out of there. You know, as soon as they hear that, those magic words, that's like, this is an acceptable reason to get rid of them. I'm not going to work with them anymore. That's my justification. I can strike them. I'm going to get them out of here.
Right. And it's like these magic words we hang on to. And I would say in our county, I think that the cases that we get with involving the most clients of color are probably going to be from the Oxnard area. And then a lot of those folks that live in the Oxnard area that come in as jurors have many thoughts about how Oxnard PD treats people. And so literally by the virtue of the system, the people that are in the neighborhood that are in fact your peers are excluded from serving as your peers because they have an opinion about what goes on in their neighborhood.
Which is based on their own real experiences. You know, it is in some ways like it's difficult because that's, you know, the power of the peremptory challenge. Like, you know, you just have to have like a facially neutral reason to get rid of this person. When you start digging a little deeper, you find like that's really not neutral. It's kind of racist. You know, when you look at like the whole system that created these beliefs, you have a racist police force that is over policing certain neighborhoods, then that causes the people in those neighborhoods to have feelings about it. And if they truthfully express those feelings in court, then it's justifiable to get rid of them and not let them serve on a jury.
And we almost like secretly, you know, obviously we don't talk to jurors secretly, but amongst each other, it's like, gosh, I just hope those people just shut their mouths. I hope they're just smart enough to just shut the fuck up so that I can sense them and I can keep them. Because if God forbid they tell the truth, like we ask them to, they're out of there. And it's just, and that's why I had sent Monis the recent article from CPDA that was asking for the new Senate bill for, you know, attempts for diverse jurors. And so that's one of the reasons why CPDA, you know, that's one of the topics they're working on, because it's just the system itself, literally, the details of how it's run goes against the principles by which it stands. It's so weird.
It is not, it's definitely not a fair system. I mean, I think that I would 1,000 times rather have a jury than a judge. I mean, it's a fucked up, bad system and it's racist, but the alternative of having one racist judge who doesn't realize that he or she is racist making the decisions is so much worse that I'm like, oh, no, give me my jury. Let's take, I'll take 12 people. Let's do 12. That.
And I actually thought about this. This morning after you'd sent me the email last night, or whenever we did this, I don't know, every day's the same. But I was thinking about it this morning, and I was thinking, okay, how many African-American clients have I taken to trial in Ventura in 13 years? And the answer was 3.
Wow.
Now, how many have I had? Maybe 30. You know what I mean? We have a pretty small population here. And I think Bart will agree, the majority of our African-American clients are, those darn people coming from LA. And that's how they're treated. But
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And when I was thinking about it to try to give you these examples, Monis, because I was thinking, what did I worry about when I knew I have a Black client and I'm putting them up there? What are the things I worried about? And it's embarrassing, but truthful to tell you that I had a discussion with every single one of those 3 dudes of, hey, the jury's going to look at you as a scary Black dude, right? It's fucking horrible that I have to have that conversation, but I wouldn't be doing my client any justice if I didn't. Have I sat with my clients and tried to correct their dialect? Yes, I have. Is that embarrassing and makes me feel like a bigot? Yes, it does. But better me than the jury.
Yeah.
It's what's my options? Throw him to the wolves and know that they're going to say he speaks ghetto.
Yeah.
What are my options in defending this guy?
We have a whole closet full of clothes that we play dress up with our clients with, because it is so important when they're in front of a jury that they look like they care about what's going on and that they're dressed in a way that is culturally appropriate for the jurors as decision makers. We don't want them in like t-shirts or things that look too urban or anything like that, because if we've got like an old lady retired juror who just looks at that and she's like, that's what I see on TV is the people who are doing bad things. I'm done. I'm not going to pay any more attention. It's
scary.
Really so much about like jury trials and in general is about creating a way for the jury to see your client as a human being and not just something they're charged with, and not just as a human being, but like as a human being that the jurors have empathy toward and can sympathize with, as opposed to just this like otherness that's out there.
Right. And I think for those 3 guys that I thought about, in this, for this discussion, I put every single one of them on the stand, because until they spoke and they found a little bit about them and they seemed like a real human, they were just a Black dude in the corner. And that's different than an adorable little white dude in the corner to the jury, right? Bart can sit next to me, shut the fuck up for 3 weeks, and nobody would think a word like, look at him, what a peach, And it's
do that thing. He's nice.
Yeah, I wouldn't let him open his mouth, but and it's horrible. But those are our realities, and it's like, okay, in our position, what do we do? Am I playing into it when I'm acknowledging it and prepping my client for that? Am I helping the system by allowing it? If I stop it, if I stand up and say to them, I know you're all fucking racist. I know you're looking at him like a 6'7" Black man that scares you. Am I helping him or am I hurting him? I don't even know anymore. It's really scary.
It's hard to know, because on the one hand, you want them, the only way to get rid of an implicit bias is to make it explicit, right. But you need the person on the other end, who actually has that bias to be open to the idea that it exists. Because in our society, you say someone is a racist or you accuse them, even if you're not necessarily a racist, but your behavior is creating racist outcomes, like that is so off-putting, to people that they immediately like put it, shut down and they're ready to fight. So it's hard to get that idea in front of a juror. The worst thing you can do as a trial attorney is to offend the jurors in a way that they're not open to you anymore, because you need them to listen to you. So it's such a fine line that you walk when you're in front of that jury of like, I need you guys to know that you're a little bit racist so that I can get you thinking about it, but I don't want to say this in a way that keeps you from listening to what I need to tell you.
Right.
Yeah, it's like I told you, I was like, we could do this, we could do a 16-week course and still have more to talk about.
Yeah. It's just like a never-ending loop of just, yeah.
Right. Where do we start? Where do we stop it?
It says so much right now with Black Lives Matter that, people seem to maybe, I mean, I don't know, I hate to say it, but seem to maybe be really waking up to some of the race issues in law enforcement. I mean, genuine hope that like this doesn't just like, our attention span as a society is pretty short, and we tend to, think about things real hard for a few minutes and then move on until the next disaster.
Mm-hmm.
But this, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but this feels a little different to me. And I'm really hoping that maybe it is.
I am too. I'm very hopeful. And I think a lot of people in our community are hopeful because it's this weird thing that we deal with. I mean, in kind of a general concept, Manas, that to contact a person, police, obviously they have to arrest them. They have to have some sort of probable cause, right? And we throw that term around a bunch when we're dealing with mock trial and other things. And, as a running joke, but not fucking funny at all, is amongst defense attorneys, as in this county, it's, what was the PC? Oh, Mexican at midnight. Like, that's PC, right? He's just Mexican at midnight. So of course it's okay. And it's like, we know that's wrong. And we know that's why they're pulled over, but the cops will he didn't have a light on his bike. Really? Because nobody in Newbury Park does either, but I don't see those motherfuckers getting stopped.
Never.
All right.
I mean, and that's one, if you're looking for statistics to back up, like the rate at which people are pulled over, that's one that's very easily proven, that people who are brown or black while driving are much more likely to get pulled over than people who are white.
Right.
Are those statistics actually available specifically in Ventura County for people that are pulled over?
I think there's probably California-wide is what we can find online. And California Public Defenders Association has a lot of links. Scope them out. If you need a sign-in to get in, let me know what you want and I'll sign in and get you whatever you want. But that's kind of those are our people.
Yeah.
They post a lot of projects. They initiate a lot of bills. They're who educate us. And I have tons of training materials from them and from California Criminal Justice Association that also keeps stats on all this stuff. I don't think our county does, mostly because our county couldn't give two shits. I assume,
they don't want to know. They're like,
listen, they're too busy repaving. Yeah, currently we are repaving Newbury Park, okay? And so we really couldn't be bothered on statisticians for important issues in Oxnard. So sorry. But I know LA has them, but I assume with your research skills, you'll get your hands on those pretty quickly. But if you need some assistance on our end, let me know because we have people.
And then there are tons of nonprofits. I mean, if you wanted, you can do a Google search about like the Vera Institute for Justice. Like, there are all kinds of nonprofits that will have all this information brought together. And if you need help, of course, we can like sit down and help you figure some stuff out.
All right. Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. And I think, I know Rich sent you his paragraph, et cetera. And, he said his piece and he was very clear, like, hey, I'm kind of on the other side of this as far as work goes. But I can tell you that even someone like Richard, who is an open-minded individual, I know from having discussion even with him, he's like, hey, you know what? I'm starting to see some changes. And you can have that discussion with him, side note, but I think, what's that?
Is that Richard Simon?
Yeah.
Oh.
And so he, even someone like him who's traditionally very, very conservative, traditionally very Republican, is like, yeah, we got to change some shit. We got to move some things around, you know? And so he has his position. I don't know if you're Facebook friends with Lindsay Filgus,
Yeah.
but yeah, he posted his shit on that. Whatever. Lindsay's doing a really good job she's up at Berkeley now, right?
No, she's at Stanford.
She's at Stanford. Okay. So anyway, she's been doing a lot of good posting, and her and Richard have had some discussion. I know, you know, we all have our positions, of course, but I think even people who traditionally would say, no, our system works, are kind of going, you know what? There's some issues here.
Yeah.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
I think so what do you think needs to happen in order to kind of break down that implicit bias that a lot of people have? Like, what do you think is the best way to go about that, even though it's such a tough issue?
For me, I would say educating people of the fact that it exists. I will tell you that I guess I never recognized implicit bias for what we call it now. I always knew that, you know, there was a Mexican at midnight. I always knew that the jurors are going to look at my Black guy differently than they would look at my white guy. I never considered that such a psychological concept, as I've learned through having trainings on implicit bias. For myself, I can say that I think that those trainings for me, even as a person that, you know, it really believes in equality for all, et cetera, and kind of pushes for that, it was very eye-opening. It was very eye-opening, and it made me feel quite shameful, frankly, for having these discussions about not talking ghetto or not wearing your, you know, purple suit, because people are going to think you look like a little too pimpy for Ventura County. Mm-hmm. It made me feel like a piece of shit. But again, what do? Do you ignore it and say, I know this is going to happen to you and I'm not going to protect you? Or do you, like, what do? I don't know what the answer is, but I can tell you that as far as for me, education of the issue, I think, is going to have intelligent, open-minded people open their minds even more and recognize the scenario. And I would love to see, for jury trials, I would love to see experts that train us come in and train the jury on implicit bias. It'll never fucking happen, but I think it would be amazing.
All right.
The judge would have to find it's relevant to the case somehow. Do that. I don't know. It's really hard. I think it's such a problem that is bigger than the criminal justice system that it's almost something that we need to deal with, like, on a societal level with, you know, our children. It's corny and cheesy to say, but like it's absolutely true. I think that, you know, racism is taught, right? I mean, no kid is born like feeling bad feelings about another race or another kind of person. So I think that it's going to have to happen in the schools if we're going to try to tackle it in some big, meaningful way. And then, you know, just through societal change. It's weird. I think that, like, our younger generations are much more open than even like mine and Ayala's. Like, you know, we didn't get it like the way we thought we had it, and we didn't get it. And then, you know, but I'm hopeful that, like, as people are, you know, exposed and able to be in contact with people, you know, that look different from them and act different from them and have different kinds of names, that they're just going to be a little naturally more open. I don't know that we'll ever have a solution to it other than just, you know, it's just kind of like a painful cultural thing that, like, we have to get through. We have to all realize, like, we're in this together, which is corny to say, but true. But how do you do it? You know, how do you get everybody to sit down and be like, we're all American, and America isn't just like my little white grandma in Kentucky, you know, like that's not the epitome of American. That's not more American than some other kind of situation. And that we all, you know, are reliant on each other, you know, because if we don't get along and we don't rely on each other, society falls apart.
Well, and I think Bart makes a really good point, and it just kind of hit me as I'm looking at the three of us, and it's like, well, I'll say we're American, but Bart is from a little podunk town in Kentucky, and you are, a person of color whose parents came and lived in Newbury Park, and I am a Jewish girl, and we're, you know what I mean? It's like just the three of us randomly on the stage, right? And I can't say that I feel like I've ever been genuinely discriminated against. Have I been, pointed out as like, oh, you're just a Jewish girl, pointed out on my religion for certain things? Sure, whatever. That's not an issue for me personally. I never personally felt attacked, but it's a thing that I think people have expressed. There's certainly obviously those issues that we're talking about, obviously color, our number one issue. And that really stems into other religious biases and other additional biases that have kind of, become sadly part of American culture.
I think when you're looking at like why people react so strongly to race, it's an immutable trait, right? It's not like, your religion, you could, if you decided, change that, if you wanted to. And, I'm gay, but I'm going to pretend like I could pass. But, I could claim to be straight, or I could,
Can we talk about that for a second, for Monis's sake?
Yeah.
Because I want Monis to know, and I don't know, and you tell me, Bart. I don't know if Bart does it on purpose or not, and he's heard us, our friend group of lawyers, say that to him, but he gets real motherfucking straight when he's in front of a jury.
It is not intentional. It is me being uncomfortable.
His tone changes?
Yeah, it's code changing, code switching, doing the whole.
His tone completely changes. His Kentucky comes out of him. It's a trip. And, I've never thought that it was intentional. But you just see, it's all of a sudden, you're like, these people are judging me. I better act like the white, straight man I was told to be.
Yeah.
And it's my implicit bias. I look at that group of jurors and I'm like, how do I conform? Like, how do I be the person that they're going to be most receptive, to? Like, what words do I use? How do I hold my body? What do I say that these people are going to, be receptive when I'm talking about my client, and that's probably, like, it's not intentional, but we all do a certain amount of code switching, subconsciously. And that's definitely where mine goes to when I'm speaking in front of a big group.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just, I feel like you kind of have to fit that certain mold of what you're expected to be in order to actually reach people, which is kind of messed up.
We can't, but with race, you can't really
can't
do that to the same extent. Like, I couldn't decide right now I want to present as African American, or to present as a Latino or something. It's just it's not there, and it's immediately apparent for a lot of people. So it's easy for them to draw conclusions and have stereotypes and develop that implicit bias, based on a characteristic that is generally obvious.
Right.
And I think for your generation, the reality is that when we cycle through all these old fucking people, and coronavirus is helping us out, with the jury pool. Listen,
we're going full eugenics now.
they're getting rid of our old white people. Come on in. This is Monis.
Hi.
He's one of my mock trial students.
Hey, Monis.
Nice to
Tommy,
meet you.
sit down. Tommy just finished a murder trial.
Oh,
and
okay.
you see how we're presenting in court?
Oh my God, wow.
Tommy just finished. His jury's out right now. They just finished rebuttal. And they had started before COVID, and now they're just finishing after COVID. But I think when your generation, and you guys, next year, you're on our jury pool, Monis. You know what I mean? And when you guys start coming through, hopefully your generation will be significantly more woke, if you will, right? More aware that there is implicit bias, more aware that police brutality is a true reality and not made up by, the ghetto people who are doing things wrong anyway. And I think that awareness hopefully will be brought into the jury room, and hopefully that will provide us with a little bit more of fairness, true fairness. I mean, Tommy's client right now, we're doing an educational session.
Oh, I see that.
Tommy's client right now, he can talk to you about him. It's sorry to throw you into this, but he's doing, and you'll probably read about it in the paper if you want. It's a 1980, the year I was born, cold hit murder rape case, who his client is an African-American man. And it's a DNA hit with some very dirty, very likely, possibly contaminated big fuck ups on DNA. And I mean, did you have a concern that LC was a black man as opposed to a white man presenting him?
I did. And then also, you should know, our client tried to make up a defense last summer. It was absurd. Like, he made up a big story and sent out handwritten affidavits. And then that got blown up. And then the DA brought in those calls to show that he did this because he thought he was guilty. And I just pointed out the fact that it was a natural thing a black man would think he would have to do to have a shot, because he didn't trust his attorney or the jurors or the system to actually do the right thing. So I directly said that
right
in closing.
That's actually a really good example.
Right.
By the way,
because
are we having lunch? Is that what's happening now?
Oh, geez. All right. We have given you an hour.
So nice to meet you, Mondes, but I am a little bit starving. Tommy, are we having lunch? Is that what's happening?
We're having lunch, guys. We're having lunch.
Nice meeting you.
We're going to have lunch. So